I grew up poor in North Alabama. I didn't have a lot. And I would say up to my late 20s, that greatly shaped my materialism. Don't get me wrong, I still spend some frivolously, but my bills get paid first. That's still something that at 42 I'm still working on, but I'm a lot better now. I feel like this generation that was born the year 2000 to now, you're fortunate in a way because a lot of that Breakfast Club mentality was starting to die down by the time your generation came around. And it's not that poor kids still don't get picked on for their clothes and things like that. It's just this is a lot more compassionate generation than the previous ones when it comes to poverty. And there could be a number of reasons for that. And please put down in the chat why you think that this generation that was born between 2000 to now, why you see such compassion from that generation. So here's the thing. In the early 2000s, I had been living in Washington State, maybe I'm going to say 3 years. Let me see. Yeah, because I got here 2005, 6, 7, 8. So I'll say, now I won't say 7 years, a few years. I'll maybe say I got here in 2005. So I was told this story between 2008 and 2009. So I get a phone call, and I won't say if this is a relative or a friend. And in that conversation, we were talking about people back home in North Alabama that I knew, of course. And this person finally was like, Tara, do you remember such and such that you used to go to school with? And I'm like, yeah, I recall. That person was cool, la, la, la. I'm like, and then that person relayed to me, well, I went to school with her sister because her sister was my age, because the person who told me is younger than me. Now, before I finish this story, let me give you some context into that entire decade of the 1990s. The 1990s, from a fashion and materialistic standpoint, American designers were king. You saw it all over Dillard's in the South, all over JCPenney's. Well, they still had their own, JCPenney still had its own brand, but you know what I'm saying. If you shopped at the big box stores like your Belk or maybe your Dillard's, you saw it. So people who are from that generation from 90 to 99 can remember that other than Versace, and when Gianni Versace was unfortunately assassinated, the American clothing companies were making bank. Polo Ralph Lauren, Donna Karan's DKNY, Michael Kors, Tommy Hilfiger. You couldn't touch a toe on those four people in the 1990s. They cornered the market on the all crisp, all American look. And people paid top dollar. Even Timberland boots. I was going to say Timbaland, the rapper, my bad. Timberland boots cost money. They were the it. You came from something and had something. If you had one pair of Timberlands, yes. If you had more than one pair or you had the matching pair. My friend and I, because she's from Baltimore, was talking about this. How in Baltimore, they color coded those according to your outfits. Those were the days. From an African American standpoint, at the end of that decade came Sean John. But before Sean John, In the mid 90s, you had Fat Farm, and then what spun from that was Baby Fat. Then you had the Kangol hat that, remember, LL Cool J made famous, or he was one of the people that made famous. That was also the decade when your black designers were also coming on the scene and making bank, and it was a fascinating decade for fashion, because the way in which people chase Louis Vuitton now and the way in which people chase Dior, you probably had to live on the Upper East Side of New York, or maybe been full California, to care about those brands back then. And not to say that rich houses in the South didn't wear those things, they just didn't wear them often. So back to my story, because I need to give you some context. In that materialistic time, the person who called me said, do you know that that person you went to school with had as much money as you thought they did? And I'm paraphrasing right now. I said, but what do you mean? And then she began to explain to me how the person had become a teen mom with 2 kids, and how there was no food in her house, and she had to share a bed with her siblings, the younger sister who went to school with the person I know. And I remember clapping back saying, you're making no sense. This girl used to come to school dressed to the nines, head to toe polo Ralph Lauren. And she wasn't wearing the knockoff. Trust me, I know. I was close to her in one of our classrooms every day. She was not wearing no knockoff. She was wearing the real deal. Timberland boots. She came to school sharp every day. I won't say whether it was middle school or high school, because within that time it was one of those two. I said, what you're telling me is not making sense. And then that person kept going into detail about how poor that family was. And then this is when I finally started to ask myself, because again, I had mentioned in a previous video that up until 2020, I really didn't give a darn about most people I went to school with, because they teased me relentlessly. But then something happened to me in 2020 when I turned 40, in part because we was all locked down, and Washington State took those lockdowns more than anyone. Of course, that's no secret, because I live an hour from Seattle. Okay, so in that time that we're locked down and you could only really go to the grocery store, and lots of museums and stuff was closed. You know, I'm a history buff, got the master's in public history recently. Can't go out and really go anywhere. I begin to do some reflection, and I start to look people up. And you'll be amazed that the people who were the best dressed that I went to school with now all have criminal records. And I'm not saying that the two things correlate. Have any of you, even if you graduated 5 years ago, known of people that we call clothes horses in school, who dressed to the nines, and you find out less than 10 years after graduation that these people were not who you thought they were? Because to me, when that story was told to me, it never made sense that your wardrobe, for that one wardrobe you wore, you could have bought groceries for 2 weeks and paid your light bill back in that day. You got the crisp hairstyle, like you've been going to the salon every 2 weeks. You head to toe polo. Why the heck would there be no food in your house? The materialism that we associate with school. And again, that's why I brought up those 2 boys that helped their classmate and brought him clothes after they went home and reflected that it wasn't nice to pick on him. That's why I bring that story and this up. Do you guys and girls, because I know y'all want to be gender neutral, do you guys are gender friendly? Do you guys and girls sit back and think sometimes that America is too obsessed with keeping up with the Joneses? Because to my knowledge, this person also lived in a nice house. They had the cars. The outer veneer is everything. I don't have much of a relationship with my mom, but here's the thing that she said. She recalls when she lived in Atlanta. Now, she never said names, so I wouldn't give you names anyway, but she never said names. My mom can recall in Atlanta of people who had the nice houses, or stories of she'd known of people who had the flashy car and the nice house, and their cupboards and their refrigerator was empty. You could have this big mansion and have hardly no furniture in it. And that's hardly the only story. Even this year, I'm getting some stories. I need a great understanding, because this one, the Stuck in High School series, why is materialism important? Did kids who want to dress nice and much rather have nice things and have the materials, is it just possible that it was better to look good and not be picked on? Because I was picked on for not having those things. And I guess my biggest question is, with our obsession with constant fashion, at what point do you think that the ones who were dressed to the nines, the ones who dressed that way while they were secretly starving at home, at what point in their life past high school did they realize that it was all for nothing? That it would have been better to have a hot meal on the table? That it would be better to have a fully furnished house? Because mind you, when I was told that story, it made no sense. I'm like, as poor as I am, I mean, I was at the time, even I had my own bed. I'm like, this is just, it didn't make any sense. I didn't have the best sheets, and I froze on fall and winter nights. Now, that's what poverty does to you. But we had a set of bunk beds where one was split for me and another one was split for one of my siblings. I forgot which one. But my goodness, I had my own bed. Do you think and suppose that those people look back 5+ years from now and say that they'd much rather have their own warm bed to have slept in? Because hindsight is a great teacher. It really is. Because that decade was fashion filled. See, once I left high school, I left, so I don't know how kids care about fashion now. I tried to watch a few seasons of the original Gossip Girl with like Leighton Meester and Penn Badgley, though it is drama and fictionalized, and Blake Lively, of course, to get a good idea of what kids think about fashion now. But I have to remember, that's an Upper East Side, I think, New York type of thing. Do kids pick on you now because you don't wear Louis Vuitton or Chanel or Dior or Yves Saint Laurent? I'm just curious. It's just a question that I have. Because some of you all who graduated a few years ago, you are that Louis Vuitton generation. You are that Versace and Armani generation. You are that Burberry generation. Because I learned a valuable lesson when I was told that story, and then many years later in 2020 I looked people up. A lot of these people who you think had money at that time growing up could have had parents that just wanted to make their lives easy, or were pushovers and bought them the best of the best and took them to the mall all of the time to show off. And those kids learned at school because they were old enough to understand to play it smooth. Maybe, or perhaps, just perhaps, they are a product of their insecure parents that needed to put up an appearance. And if you sacrificed food to be a clothes horse, that was the best way to be. That is the part of high school that bugs me the most. is to know now that some of the people I grew up with may have even been selling drugs or had someone selling drugs to get them the clothes that they have. So they can keep up with a image that is put on media and on television. All the while eating at school and putting up a face and didn't know where their next meal at night was going to come from. Not that I didn't have those problems, but I had food over clothes. I didn't dress the best, didn't have the best fashion, felt pretty ostracized. But there was food in my house most of the time. Not the stuff I desired, and certainly not stuff when I become a mom, because I'm proclaiming that I would ever feed my children. But it was there. So I just want to leave you guys with one question. Is it worth it?